Merhaba, welcome to our Language of the Prophets series. We are in Torah portion Vayeshev today, and we are doing the third Aliyah. If you didn't catch the other Aliyot, please go to the YouTube channel Hebrew Literacy, and soon our upcoming website HebrewLiteracy.com. Right now it's just a placeholder, but hopefully we'll be able to have more Hebrew language learning resources available. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father King, Ken Yiratzon Ki Kol Shomei Et קולי היום הזה, או הלילה הזאת, כי יחיה להם שכל טוב ממך. בי אדוני, תעזר אותנו ללמוד את תורתך ולשון הקודש, טוב בעיניך וגם בעיני האדם. Okay, let's go. The reading tonight, or today, depending on your time zone, for the third Aliyah, it's in Sefer Pareshat, chapter 37, verse 23 through verses 30 to verse 36. Okay, a little bit hefty, but I'll watch the time and see how we're doing. So I want to start with something new I'm trying here. Why did that go sideways? Oh, it just didn't finish animating. Okay. I'm going to have this grammar corner. So we'll see. This is an experiment. I don't promise to do this. Bli neder, huh? But I'd like to every time have a little bit of a grammar nugget. And something that, if you're advanced in Hebrew, you might not have ever known before. Maybe it'll nail down. Or if you're even beginning in Hebrew, something that can be helpful to you, either now or later. So the idea is that we'll be cycling through the Torah, right? You'll be going through every year of the Torah in the Hebrew original. So you'll start to pick up things over time. So if you don't get it all now, don't worry about it. It's going to come back to you later, hopefully. But for those of you who want to take note, tonight we're going to be talking about Vav when it's in initial clauses. Okay? So I'm just going to read here from this textbook by Putnam. It's called The Hebrew Bible Insert, A Student's Guide to the Syntax of Biblical Hebrew. All right, and there's the publishing information from 2002. So he's got a nice example here where he says, when Vav is in initial clauses, an important distinction in biblical narrative is whether a clause initial Vav, that means you're starting that chunk of the sentence, that's the clause, is prefixed to a verb or a non-verb. The distinction signals the clause's general function and may affect its overall structure. The clause initial Vav simply joins clauses. Its translation depends entirely upon relationship between the content of the clauses which it joins. Okay, so if that sounds like word soup to you, here in a moment we're going to have some examples to make it a bit easier. Okay, so take, for example, Vav plus verb, and we've been talking about this a lot. I've been showing this through immersion when it comes up, right? Oftentimes we have a Vav consecutive or Vav conversive, but let's just look a little bit more deeper at what's happening here, okay? So this is usually in a narrative. We're hearing a story or a sequence of events or some history, something that happened. It's either logical or chronological or both. And so the actual scholars will oftentimes call this the Vayiktol form, and you probably heard me say this. Vayiktol. So you've got your verb, usually Vayiktol, those are the vowels, although some of them change, like this is a hollow verb, so it's different. Okay, and so I've been pointing out that you don't always have to translate Vav as and. So a lot of people, if they do 4 semesters of Hebrew in seminary, or God forbid 2 semesters, they come out, and they think that Vav is always and or but, right? And that's just not the case. If you do that, your translations are going to sound forced, and you're going to miss some concepts. So Shamash Yochanan asks, can the Vav function both as a reversive and a conjunction at the same time? Yes. Yes, it can. It doesn't have to, but it can. And it doesn't have to be conjunction. It can also be like when, right? And in some cases, if. Although usually when it's joined with like ki in there, ki or im or something like this. So you'll learn over time. The biggest thing to drive home is to be flexible with your Vav, all right, if it's attached to a verb. All right, if it's attached to a verb, then you be flexible and see what makes more sense in the English. So in this case, we have Vayakam Yona. Okay, so this is from the book of Jonah, right? Vayered Yafo. All right, and in the grammar book they translate Jonah arose. Notice he doesn't say and Jonah arose. So Yakom by itself is imperfect. It means Jonah arises, like continually, or Jonah will arise, right? And so here we have our Vav consecutive, Vav conversive. It's causing the time to be the opposite, right? So it's saying that he rose. But you'll notice, I don't have to say and he rose. I don't even have to translate the and if it's not called for in English. And it's very interesting. If in many of the translations of the apostolic writings, a lot of the sentences of the ones that try to be very literal or true to the Greek, they'll say and. They'll start with and, which really isn't appropriate in English, but they're trying to be true to the text. Because the Greek in the apostolic writings is true to the Hebraic way of thinking. And there's even statistics that I've seen. I have a book on this somewhere that, who is the author? I can't remember his name right now. Okay, I'll put it in the comments later if I can find that book. Basically, he shows that like in most of the Besorot, the Gospels, 76% of the sentences in the Greek begin with and then a verb, which is this pattern that we're seeing here for narrative telling in biblical Hebrew, right? So that to me shows that either there was a Hebrew original text, or Esau might take issue and say Syriac, i.e., like Aramaic, or there was at least that was in their minds, right? They're thinking this way still as they put things in Greek. So Jonah arose, not and Jonah rose. And then we get and went down to Jaffa. He found a ship. Look at this. Vayimsa onia. So that's he found a ship. Yimsa means he will find. And the Vav changes the time so that he found, right? Past tense. But notice it doesn't say and he found a ship. Just he found a ship. This is totally correct, totally fine. And even sometimes Vav functions like an exclamation point. And I've called those out sometimes. So I think it's nice for those of you that have been following. Now you've seen this many times, and then here's like a grammar nugget talking about it. Okay, I'm trying to keep it short. I didn't want to show the other examples of Vav, like in narratives like V'haya and V'heye, and that we'll do another time. But I just want to make it bite-sized for today. Okay? All right. So any questions on the grammar nugget there before I move on to the actual Aliya Yomi? And great, we have a minion. I'm so glad. Welcome all of you. If you're new to Biblical Hebrew, hang in there. I'm really happy that that the strong group of my students have decided to take on learners and teach the Aleph Bet. This is truly in the spirit of Jewish learning, to pass on that learning. That's really great. And it's my desire for all of you that in the future you'll have a class of your own, even sharing the grammar points and walking through the Torah or something like this. And it's really, really useful because in Hebrew, lamad, to learn, is a very light meaning of the verb, right? But when we intensify it and we put it in the PL binyan, which is an intensive meaning, right? The example I usually use is shavar, is to break, but shibel is to smash, or to utterly smash to pieces. So lamad is to learn, but limed is to teach. You see? Intensive learning is teaching. And it's really true when you step through it yourself. I think some of you are probably seeing this now. I bet you are. As you're teaching others Hebrew, you're starting to feel more secure in your own Hebrew understanding. Kind of passing through it another time, perfecting some of the stuff maybe you didn't perfect the first couple times through. All right. Okay, if there's no questions or comments then, I will go ahead and get to the Aliya Yomi for today. If the computer decides to change screens. Oh, there we go. Yay, animation's even working. Well, part of it. I thought there was another one on this page. Oh, there we go. Good. Okay, so verse Kaf Gimel. So of course you should know your Hebrew numerals by now. It's a travesty that the Western world, based on the Judeo-Christian ethic, uses Arabic numerals. I don't understand why that happened. Well, I understand why it happened. I just wish it didn't happen. So Kaf is 20 and Gimel is 3. So if you know your Hebrew numerals, you'll really be doing well if you get into Gematria or one of those other sorts of things. Baruch haba, Wijai, is it, who just joined us? Just make sure to keep your microphone off. That's what we're doing here, okay? You can type any questions or comments you have. Okay, so getting into the text. Vayhi ka'asher ba Yosef el chayv. And we'll mark it here because here is our atnach, or etnachta, the little wishbone ta'am here, tells me this is the end of the clause. And just like we were just talking about the vav, beginning of clause, this is the next section. When you see vayhi, yihi means it will be, right, imperfect. But the vav, he swaps the time. In this case, it's a vav conversive, right? Some call vav consecutive. So instead of he will be, it was, right? So and it was, or and it came to pass, ka'asher ba Yosef, as Yosef ba, you should know ba, he was coming, el unto Echayv, unto his brothers. So it happened that he arrived at his brothers, is really what the text is communicating here. And by the way, in case you're wondering, I actually changed the precise textual text that we're using every time. Tonight we're reading from the BHQ, which is the most up-to-date, latest scholarly version of the Masorah, right? So oftentimes I'll switch between that and Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia or Westminster Leningrad Codex, right? If we get into other parts in Tanakh, sometimes we'll do Aleppo Codex like that. So okay, so Vayaf Shitu et Yosef et Kutonto et Ketonet Hapasim Asher Alahaiv. Okay, so this word Pashat, do not confuse it with Pashat spelled with a tav. Some of you might be thinking, oh, that means simple, right? Like the clear, the plain meaning, right? Like we have the different levels of interpretation of the Hebrew text, right? Pashat is the most obvious, right? Based on the grammar and understanding what the story is telling you, right? And that's where we get Pesher. Pesher is an interpretation. So this is not Pashat with a tav. It's Pashat with a tet. See, if it was a tav, it would mean that. But it's a tet. So Fashat is to strip off, to pull off, right? To remove something from something else. And this is a Hefil one. Remember, we've been talking about the Hefil binyan. If you have a yod before the third root letter of the verb, that is an indication that we are in the causative verbal form, the Hefil binyan as we call it. So here's our first letter, Pei, Shin, Tet. And then there's our yod. There's your little hint. Or if you have a hey prefix, that's the other way. But in the imperfect, we don't see the hey prefix. So it means they caused him to strip. So some of the commentators, they comment, in the Mikrot Gedolot, the rabbinical Bible, the Rabbiner Bible, as it was formerly known, they forced him, so they made him strip off his clothes. Although one of the commentators believes that actually they tricked him into taking off his Ketonet Pasim. So Yaf Shitu means they made him strip, and then the Vav is changing the time. And they caused him to strip. Caused who? And when you have a Hefil verb, it's sometimes there'll be two objects. There'll be the person that's being caused, or the force that's being caused to do the thing, and the object of the verb. And that's what's happening here. And of course, our definite direct object markers, et, they're always there to tell us which one is doing that. So here we have et, and we have another et. So here are two objects, Yosef and Ketonet, Kutonto. All right? So the O means his, right? So they caused Yosef to strip off his Ketonet, his tunic. And now look at this, even a third et this time, but this et is just kind of qualifying this previous one. Which Ketonet? Et Ketonet Hapasim. Although some of the sages, they believe that the first Ketonet, it's telling us that even his underwear he had to strip off, so they made him go utterly naked. So there's two ways of looking at this. So Ketonet Pasim, this is a construct chain. Ketonet, oops, I did green instead of blue. Oh well, the green looks nice. Ketonet Pasim, all right? Ketonet Hapasim, pardon me. So the ha makes it definite, right? So it's whatever this adjective is, this thing. I don't believe it really means many colors. There's many reasons for this. I go into it quite a bit in my book, but the reason that we have this tradition of many colors is actually from the Greek, right? In the Greek, in the Septuagint, we have this word, I think it's palikos, something like that. That means many colors, and so in that context, and so that passes down then to the Vulgate, and then those two ancient versions, the Vulgate and the Septuagint, they both translate it this way, and then it comes into English, right? Because the early Goyish believers, that was the language they learned, was Greek. They usually didn't learn Hebrew. Instead, they'd read Septuagint and they'd read apostolic writings, all in Greek, right? Or Latin, right? Because it's the language of Rome. Once the Holy Roman Emperor, it became Christianized. So, because it's whatever it is, sorry, my keyboard's stuck there, it makes the entire chain right? So the tunic of Pasim, whatever Pasim is. Now, in the Targums, we translate this word Pasim actually to mean, it comes from pas. This very first, these two letters, pas. In Aramaic, pas means the same thing as kaf in Hebrew. Kaf, which is kaf, like the letter kaf. It's shaped like that. But you can also spell out the letter name, right? With a face or feet. Okay? So a kaf, that's the palm of your hand or the sole of your foot. And that's what a pas was in Aramaic. And so there's this understanding in the Targums that it was a tunic that went all the way to the soles of his feet, and all the ways to his hands, being probably of one material, right? One material with as few seams as possible. I like this interpretation. What's really neat about it for us as believers in the Mashiach is that Yosef is a type of Mashiach ben Yosef, right? You understand there were two types of messianic prophecies. There's Mashiach ben Yosef, and this is picked up in the Talmud, that there's the Mashiach, the Messiah who is to come and suffer for his people, and that's certainly you can see in Yosef's life. He's a slave, right? He's a slave. He gets reduced from being a rich man, a spiritual man's favorite son, to being a slave, right? Just the degradation, and then in prison after that, as if it wasn't enough to be a slave. So that's a type of Mashiach ben Yosef. And then we've got Mashiach ben David, the Messiah son of David, who is the conquering Messiah, the one who will come and reign. For example, we believe when Yeshua HaMashiach returns, he will be fulfilling his role in the prophecies about Mashiach ben David, the Davidic Messiah, who will rule the earth from Jerusalem and will defend Israel from all of our enemies who will be attacking us. So this very cloak, it's kind of like an echo from Providence about Messiah. You remember what happens when he's on the execution stake, right? He had this particular vestment that the soldiers didn't want to split apart because it was seamless, right? It was all of very high quality. It was expensive, and so they cast lots for it, right? So anyway, that I don't have time to get into that too much, but I just wanted to sow that out there. It's kind of nice. There's other things it can mean. There's an Akkadian word that this is related to, and the Akkadian word means there are valuable items sewn into it, like pieces of metal and silver. And in the Bible, the only other place where we see this word used, ketonet hapasim, it's in the books of Kings, referring to princesses, like a princess would wear this long kind of robe. The Akkadian version, it had this meaning of like a gown that you'd put on a female idol, right, like an idol of a goddess. Right, so again, we're not saying the Bible borrows from this stuff. It's just linguistically, it's interesting to see how the related languages interpret this. We even have it in Ugaritic. We have this in one of the Ugaritic documents. It says a lavash hapas, pardon me, lavash hapasim, which is like a garment of pasim, but it doesn't help us to know what it is because outside of context, whatever. So, all right, asher alav, relative pronoun asher, which alive, which was upon, pronominal suffix him. And feel free to type your questions. I'm glancing at the chats to see if there's questions coming along, okay? I don't want to leave anybody out or miss anything there. Yeah, okay. All right, so continuing on. Verse Kaf Dalet. Vayikahu vayishlechu oto haboa. Okay. Then they seized him. So this is lakach. It's hard to see what the root is there. So I've been mentioning this. It comes up quite a bit. This is a good word to recognize. Okay. So lakach, you have this vocabulary word, guys. I remember is in your list. Lamed kuf chet means to take, right? To take. Although it also can mean to buy, right? As we recently had, and in Ugaritic it only means to buy, right? Which is the closest language to biblical Hebrew, Ugaritic, right? Closer than Aramaic even, and so. What's interesting is we had in Parsha recently where Esau, the Rasha, he says, he like admits, right? Remember he admits, he says, first he bought my birthright, and now he has taken my blessing, using this word lakach in both instances. But with the Hebrew parallelism, we understand the nuance is shifting. So he admits that it was bought, right? So, okay. So, yikachuhu, it means they will take him. Right? And then the Vav would mean, it makes the time backwards, so they took him, right? But what's interesting here, we actually have a comment here by Kimchi, in one of the great rabbis. He says, there's actually a letter Vav missing in this word, making it appear as if only one brother took him, right? And so according to the Midrash, Pareshat Rabbah, the story is that it was actually Shimon who was the one who took him, right? And that's why we're missing the full Vav. The full spelling would have a Vav here, right? Vayikachuhu, we'd expect a vav, but instead the Masoretes had to add the kibbutz because the consonantal text was missing that shurik here, right? That long u sound, right? And so Kimchi is saying the text lacks it for a reason. It's hinting that only one of them took, even though they're all collectively responsible. One actually seized him, and that was Shimon. And it's nice. Midrash Rabbah later says that this is why Yosef Hatzadik later in Egypt, he singles out Shimon to be the one that he keeps as a hostage. Remember, he's pretending, to do some things, and he singles him out and keeps him. So it's kind of interesting. In this, okay, so let's continue on. Vayashlichoto haboroa. Okay, shalach. Yishlachu means they will send, and the vav changes the time, and they sent oto him habora. So bo means a cistern, right? It's like a pit that sometimes has water in it when it rains. It doesn't always have to have water, right? But it's like waterproof. There's probably clay or something down there, something like this. And at the end we have a hey locative, direction towards the pit. So they sent him, they tossed him towards the pit, towards the cistern. Okay, Yochanan says that my audio is cutting out sometimes. Is anybody else reading it? I see the other questions. I'll chime in just a sec. Sorry, I wasn't seeing them. It might just be an internet issue, Yochanan. I will post this afterwards on our Hebrew Literacy YouTube channel. So if anything you missed, on my side at least it will be recording okay. Yochanan says it's good for Yosef that the construct chain was not an infinitive. Hey. And then let's see. Tet says, if many brothers, how should it read? Okay, we would expect. Look, the text, the way it's pointed by the Masoretes, it's correct for many brothers. But this is what we call the defective spelling, right? Because there's the u, the kibbutz here, right? The little angular ones. And Kimchi is just saying that for the full proper spelling, you would have expected instead a shuruk to be here. Because remember, the sacred text is without dots originally. The full holy text, like you open a Torah scroll, there's no dots in the scroll, right? The dots are only in the codices, right? Or the Talmud talk in Tractate Soferim talks about certain dots and where they should be and stuff like this. So this is just Kimchi. He's making an observation. Do not take this to the bank, okay? Like you don't take this and say, definitely this word should mean he took, right? Because the way it's pointed, the way the Masoretes pointed the vowels, it does mean they took him. Kimchi is just saying, you remember, see my little green marker here? For those of you who sat into used to my, who don't fall asleep in my Tehillim time series, when I go through the Psalms and we talk about the Ugaritic and the Phoenician and kind of, if the vowels were different, it would mean this, right? That kind of stuff. This is my marker meaning vowel change, right? So that's what Kimchi is saying, if you had different vowels there. Okay? That's a great question. I'm glad you've called out on that. I want to make sure that this is adding and not, not confusing anyone. Okay. The habo reik, and the cistern or the pit was empty. Look here, we have the same word spelled differently here and here. Right here we have, this is called the full spelling, right, with the vav and the cholim, and here this is called the defective spelling, right, where instead it's actually shortened down here. Pardon, it's shortened up here to the cholim, right, without a vav. Okay, so this is kind of what Kimchi was talking about over here, right? So you've got a defective cholim. There's no consonant in the consonantal text. The Masoretes had to put this in here. And then the very next word, it's spelled fully like this. So for those of you who are really into digging in gematria and you want to find secret meanings and stuff, this is a footprint in my understanding. I don't know why they're spelled differently in these two places, but it might be worth investigating. If you're the kind of person who likes to do that stuff, please report back to us. Maybe in the comments in the YouTube later you could share with the class what you find, yeah, with the rest of us. Okay, reik, this is another example. This word is often spelled rik with a yod, but here it's got this defective spelling. It just means empty, right? So it's empty. So why does the text bother to tell us that it's empty? And then it clarifies, ein bo mayim. Ein means there was not, bo, in it, your pronominal suffix, o, right, in it. It literally says in him, because bo is masculine, that's why, okay? Mayim, water. There wasn't water in it. Midrash Rabbah, this Pareshat Vayeshev tells us, but there were snakes and scorpions. So that's the tradition. The tradition says there's no water, but there were snakes and scorpions. Interesting. And I believe it's Nachmanides actually expands on that. He takes a little bit of issue with Midrash Rabbah there. Well, he expands on it. He says, well, look, it might be true that there were snakes and scorpions in there, but they didn't know it, right? Because the reason why the text points out that it was empty, meaning there's no water, is that they wouldn't have thrown him in if they saw a bunch of water because he would drown, right? And they already said, let's not let his blood be on our hands, right? They already made this agreement to not murder him directly, right? But just to kind of put him in the pit and let's see what happens, right? So that's why the text is clarifying that there wasn't water in it. But they didn't know that there were snakes in there, and they didn't know that there were scorpions. And if they could have seen it in the darkness of the pit, then they would have understood understood that Hakadosh Baruch Hu was protecting him. That Hashem was actually protecting him. That's the Rashbam. Rashbam also chimes in and says that's he's saying what I'm saying, that had there been water in it, they would not have cast him in, right? Because they agreed, do not touch him yourselves, back in verse 22. All right. And let's see, Nachmanides, he makes the point. He said, okay, continue on. All right. Verse Kaf Hey, 25. Vayeshevu lechol lechem, vayis'u einehem, vayir'u v'hinei ochat yishme'elim ba'a mi Gil'ad. There's our end of clause marker, right there. So we're going to go back and let's translate that clause. That's a long clause. Okay? So this is the verb yashav. Yashav means to sit down or to dwell, right? That's why when we have the mitzvah that says on Sukkot that we have to dwell in Sukkot, in booths, the sages interpret that the mitzvah is fulfilled if you at least sit down and have a meal in it, because the verb can mean sit or it can mean dwell, right? And the text doesn't specify exactly which one. Although it's best to spend the night, but if you just sit and have a meal, you fulfill the mitzvah. So this means, with the Vav conversive, and they sat down, lechol, this is an infinitive, to eat, lechem, to eat bread. Vayiseu, this is hard to recognize, it's a pei nun verb. So the verb is nasa, nasa. So nasa, meaning to lift up, just think of NASA, or SpaceX recently, right? Lifting up the payload, Baruch Hashem, means to lift up, to carry. So in ancient Hebrew, this would have been yin su, right? But in this case, it's vayisu. And they lifted up einehem. Hem is a pronominal suffix, meaning their einayim, their eyes. Vayiru. So this is hard to recognize. So it's reish, aleph, and it's a lamed hey verb. So the hey disappeared. Trying to make my hays bigger. Minister Dr. Dwayne Miller from our organization up in Pennsylvania, he commented that sometimes the hays are too small, and he was watching on a 60-inch screen. So I can't imagine for those of you watching on a cell phone. so I'm trying to remember to make them bigger. All right. V'hinei, and behold, orchat yishmaelim. Here we have a construct chain. We'll make it blue this time. So this is an interesting word. That's why I marked it in yellow. There's a famous commentator known as the Orach Chaim, right? He takes it from the Psalm. Who is the man who loves Orach Chaim, right? The way of life. So, but Orcha, ending in a hey, so Orach is a path. It's a synonym for derech. Yeah? Yeah, that's right. Good, Tet, Lamed Hey verb. Yofi. Good job. So in Orcha, it's actually those who go on a windy path, right? So it's a caravan, something like that. So a caravan of Yishmaelim, right? So, and look, there was a caravan of Yishmaelim. And notice it's not the caravan of Yishmaelim. Why? Because the word that is in the absolute, the very last word, is not definite. Yishmaelim, Yishmaelites, it's not definite, right? If you said, Og, son of so-and-so, the Ishmaelite, then it's already definite, but it's not definite. So a band or a caravan of Ishmaelites, Ba'a, they were coming. And it's feminine, notice, Ba'a, coming, because let me change my color, it refers back to the construct chain, and in our construct chain, it's Orcha, this one right here, this word, which is feminine. It's only a tav because it's in the construct. The hey goes back to the ancient ending tav. So there was a band or a caravan of Ishmaelites coming, mi Gil'ad, from Gilead. Right? So this, of course, is mean. Most of you know, Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, right? When you bless the bread. So the noon went inside the gimel, and that's why we have the strong dagesh there, right? Mi, from Gil'ad. Usually it's Gilead, it's odd because it's a pausal, it gets lengthened quite a bit there. Ugemalim, and camels. Pardon me. Ugemalahem. I sight read that instead of actually sounding it out. So, and their camels, noseim, were carrying, again from nasa, same word we saw up here, but this is an active participle, were carrying, Nechot. Now this is a hapax legamemnon, this word. It only occurs one time in all of Scripture. Okay? So nechot, what in the world is nechot? I don't expect you to know this word. Nechot is like ladanum resin. It's from this cistus rose, according to Halot, right? So, but we learned from the sages that it's a kind of gum. That's how they interpreted it, right? So maybe the gum is the product that was made from this resin, right? And Ibn Ezra gives credit to this guy. Okay. And tsari. So tsori is balm or balsam, right? An aromatic resin derived from the bark of the anesthetic tree shrub. So it's, I think I read somewhere else before that it's related to cinnamon. It's like a larger bark, a thicker bark, not quite as strong as cinnamon. And then valot. Lot is our old friend myrrh, right? All right. Holachim, coming, the horid. So this verb, this is hard to recognize if you're not used to seeing this. Okay? So what is up with this verb? So this is the verb yod, resh, dalet. So yarad you should know by now. Yarad is to go down. And it's a pei yod verb. So what happens, pei yod verbs, that yod can move by the wayside. And here we have a vav, would have been wav in ancient times. So they were to go down. So they were coming to go down. They were on their way, probably is better, to go down, to descend Mitzrayim. So Mitzrayim means Egypt, and the Helacative means direction towards Egypt. Verse Kaf Vav, so that's 20 plus 6, 26. Vayomer Yehuda el Echaiv. Then Yehuda said unto his brothers, Mabetza kihi naharog et achinu v'chisinu et damo. Sorry for the delay there. I had to move my laptop so I could see the screen. So ma means what? Betza. So betza is an interesting word. I don't have room to put it up there, but there's an interesting phrase. Batza betza. Batza betza means to cut the thread of life. To cut the thread of life. But from that we get the word betza that we have here. Betza. Betza is usually translated by the older translations. I don't know if it is here or not, but ill-gotten gain, right? In the Proverbs they translate it that way, right? Do not run after ill-gotten gain, my son, he says. He says my son because that's just the teacher-child relationship, not that it's his literal son. So what is the ill-gotten gain, he's saying? Ki naharog, if harag means to slay. The noon here is showing us it's we from anachnu. This is imperfect. So if we will, those of you who study Greek, this would probably be the subjunctive translated in the Septuagint. Like, it's something that hasn't happened that might happen, right? So what will be the gain if we will slay, or if we should slay, et, the object marker, achinu. So pronominal suffix, you should have them mastered by now, guys. Nu, not like Yiddish, nu, different. This is our ach, our brother. The chisinu et dam o. Vav consecutive. And then this is harder to recognize. This is kasa. So I think Tet knows what it is. It's a lamed hey. Oh, I made the hey small. Sorry, Dr. Dwayne. I made it small. But kasa is to cover up, like to hide something, right? From this you get words like tablecloth. There's a machse, something that covers the table, right? There's a covering, obscuring, something like that, okay? So kasinu, and we covered up. We shall, and if we will cover up, right? So chisinu means we covered up. The vav changes the time, and we will cover up. Et object damo, pronominal suffix his dam. Again, I better check to see how I'm doing on time because, all right, it's already 9. Okay, you guys meet from 8. How long do you usually meet tonight? Can someone type in there? I'll go to the next page while you're doing that. All right, somebody write in. I'll keep going. Kitty, get off the table, please. Kaf Zion, 27. Lechu v'nimkarenu l'ishmaelim v'yadeinu ativoho Ki achinu v'sareinu hu. Lechu, this is from halach. Halach, go. Oh, that's a super small hey. Here it is. It's a hey. Halach. So lechu, like we had lech lecha when Hashem speaks to Avraham Avinu, right? So go, v'nim karenu, or come, v'nim karenu, and let us makar, let us sell, layish elim, to the Yishmaelites, right? And you see that it's the here. There's the footprint left from the ha, right? So even though the lamed he pushes the ha out, there's only one time in Scripture I've ever seen where it doesn't push it out, where I can remember seeing it at least. It's in the Psalms, and one of the Psalms that says be ha shemayim, where usually that would become ba shemayim, right, in the heavens. So this in ancient times might have been le ha Yishmaelim, right, and it became la Yishmaelim. V'yadeinu, in our hands, al tihi vo, shall not be bo, against him. Pronominal suffix, right? Ki achinu, for he is, you have to make is here in English to make sense. Achinu, he's our ach, he's our brother. V'sarenu, he's our basar. Basar is one of your vocab words. Flesh. Who he is. Remember, you're thinking like Yoda. Our flesh it is. Right? So it's our flesh, he is. Vayishme'u echayv. Pardon me, echayv. So they obeyed his brother. Okay, so they listened to him. Verse Kaf Chet 28. Vaya'averu, pardon me. Vaya'averu anashim midyanim socharim vayimshechu vaya'alu et Yosef min habe'or vayimkeru et Yosef Ishmaelim Vesrim Kasef. Okay. So that's a long clause. Where do we start here? Okay. Avar, to cross over, like the word ivri, like a Hebrew one who crosses over. So the Midianite men crossed over. Socharim. Now this is clarifying, what are they? Socharim. So a sochar, this is a merchant, right? From the verb sicher, to go around. Like the idea is to go around about in the land, right? Somebody who back then who would travel around a lot and go around. Usually he's a merchant. He's doing it because he's selling something, right? 9:30. Okay, great. Great. That gives me a goal. Let me just check my time. See what we're doing. Okay. Great. Vayim shechu. So mashach is to drag. So it's like, and they dragged. Vaya'alu. This is a lamed hey verb. So the hey we don't see. Right? Should be a hey there. Ayin lamed hey. So, and they made go up is really what's happening here at Yosef. So they dragged and made him go up. Probably the idea is with ropes. And we actually, the Masorah tells us, again, for those of you who don't know the Masorah, it's in the ancient tradition. When you take like the Westminster Leningrad Codex, which is used by all Christian groups for translating the Old Testament, for example, and by many Jewish groups, it doesn't just have the vowels and the words, it also has little like numbers in the columns and interesting statistics and these sorts of things, which do not invariably get translated into your English Bible, right? And so Masorah points out that the exact form of this verb is only here, and the second place is in Yirmiyahu 38, verse 13, where it says they dragged Yirmiyahu up with the ropes and pulled him out of the pit. So the same thing here, mashach, to drag, and to bring up, to make go up. Min habo'o, from the cistern. Then, so this is probably then, they sold Yosef to the Yishmaelites. At Stein. Be'esri kasef, for 20, literally it just says for 20 kesef, for 20 silver. Right? The idea is 20 shekels of silver, right? And of course, for those of you who cued in to what I was talking about, I'm here. They're saying you don't hear me, you don't see me. Interesting. I'm just going to keep going because at least we're getting the recording. Sorry about that. The recording will be complete. I don't know what happened there. It didn't show anything on my end. Maybe the internet went off and on. So when you see that they sold him for esrim, I have it marked in blue, kesef, 20 shekels of silver, although it doesn't say shekels, it's like 20 silvers is really what it's saying. Of course, as I was talking before about, the actual Mashiach has already fulfilled the prophecies of Mashiach ben Yosef, right? The suffering Messiah, right? When he comes back, he'll do the Davidic prophecies. The Messiah who will come and reign, right? He'll rule the world from Jerusalem. He'll come in as the cloud rider, all these sorts of things, right? So the first ones have been done. And again, as I mentioned, Yosef HaTzadik, he's a type of, his whole life is a type of the Mashiach, right? He's suffering. And look at this. They sold him for 20 pieces of silver. Of course, if you've ever read any of the Basorot, the good news, you have to know what this is referring to, right? This is a reflection, a backwards reflection of the 20 pieces of silver that Ishkariot would actually sell the Mashiach to the Kohanim for. Vayavi'u et Yosef Mitzrayim. So this is Ba, and look, we have our Yod before the third root letter, so that means it's Hefil, it's causative. So Ba means to come, they caused to come, right? So they brought, and they brought Yosef Mitzrayim. Helacative, direction towards Mitzrayim, towards Egypt. So sad. Verse Kaf, Tet. Vayashav Reuven el Habeor, V'hinein Yosef ba'abo. Okay, so this one is hard to recognize. It's a hollow verb. So the second root letter is actually a vav, technically shurik, right? In our case. So shin, vav, beit, shuv, it's to return, right? Like teshuvah, to make a return, to make repentance. So yashav is he will return, right? Or he is returning, like he's constantly doing it. But vayashav means and then the time swaps, he returned. Who's the subject? Reuven. Reuven returned. So then probably is better instead of and. Right? See how cumbersome and sounds? And Reuben returned. You don't always do and like some kind of robot with vav. It's not. It misses the syntax of the text. So then Reuben returned el unto Habor, the cistern. Vehine, and look, behold, ein Yosef. There's no Yosef. Ba beor, in the beor. See, there's a marker for the, right? Vayikach et begadav. Okay, kara. This kuf reish ayin, or kof, some people learn the letter that way. It means to tear a garment, right? To tear. So yikra, he will tear. Vayikra, and he tore, or so he tore begadav, his begadim, which means garments, his clothing. And the interesting thing is, there's I can't remember which sage. I'd like to give credit, but one of the sages. Oh, I think it's even Ezra. It could be wrong. One of the sages explains that when it says that they sat down to eat, remember on the previous page we mentioned Vayashav lechol lechem, they sat down to eat bread, right? That the way that shepherds would eat is that half of them would sit down and eat, and the other half, or a few of them, would tend to the sheep, tend to the flocks, right? To make sure a wolf doesn't eat them while they're eating food, right? And then they change. When the one was done eating, the one batch was done, it's like a shift, right? Taking a shift break. Right? And so that explains very nicely why Reuven was not there. It's because if you don't know this tradition of Israelite shepherds, you're going to think, there's always kind of a weird thing, like, why did Reuven leave? He knows they want to kill him. You'd think he'd stay there, right? But he sees, okay, another sage comments that they went far enough away to eat that they wouldn't hear him screaming, oh, pull me out, brothers, right? So they go far enough away. Reuven feels that it's safe to tend the sheep because they're far from Yosef. They're not going to hurt him, right? And then it just all makes more sense understanding this in the Israelite culture. All right, verse Lamed. Oh, actually, there's one thing I forgot to mention. Rashi actually says one of the reasons why Reuven did not want to eat with them is that he was making teshuvah. He's repenting, right, for what's happening. He's like already repenting. He wanted to fast and repent for something. Yeah. So, all right, continuing. Verse Lamed. Vayashav el Echayv. And he shuved, right? He returned unto his brothers. Vayomar, and he said, Hayeled enenu, va'ani anna aniva. Hayeled, the child, enenu, he is not, like he's not here. Va'ani, and I, anna. Anna's kind of weird here, if you don't know anna. So this is actually an Ugaritic word. We find this in Ugaritic. In Ugaritic, an means where. And so we understand that the Hebrew anna is a hey locative. So it's like to wear, right? This is actually where the the older English, I think Yochanan would correct me if I said the Queen's English, because it's not, pardon me, it's not Victorian English, it's a different one, but whatever style of English that the King James is in, Shamash Yochanan, he studied Middle English, right? So the older style of English. So so it's something like whither, right? Whither makes more sense. To where? Whither shall I go? Aniba. It's like I can't go now because the kid's gone. Verse Lamed Aleph. Vaikhu et ketonet Yosef. Vayishchatu se'ir. Sorry, my monitor's being blocked again. Where are we? Izim. Vayitbelu et hakutonet badam. Okay. This again is lakach. So they lakacht, they took the ketonet Yosef, and that is a construct chain. You guys should be recognizing these now. Ketonet Yosef. So Yosef is definite, right? And so what happens when the last word is definite in a construct chain? The whole chain is definite. It imparts the definiteness to the other part. You can't say et ha ketonet Yosef. That's not allowed. Only the last word can have a ha in it. Okay? So the tunic of Yosef, the garment, Yosef's garment. Vayishchatu. Shachat is to slaughter. A shochet is a butcher, right? So, and they slaughtered a se'ir izim. This is literally, it means a hairy goat, right? So it means one of the male goats. They slaughtered a male goat. Vayitbelu, and they dipped the ketonet, right? The tunic, ba, in the dam, in the blood. They dipped the tunic in blood. All right, great. Last page. Looks like we're going to make it in time, maybe even with some Q&A when we're done. Baruch Hashem. All right. Verse Lamed Beit 32. Let me change my color. Yeah, that'll be nice. Okay. Vaishalchu et ketonet hapasim vayaviu el avihem vayamru zot matzanu. Shalach, notice the dot in the middle letter, okay? This is a sign of the PL binyan. PL, it's supposed to be a P, I don't know if you can see it there. PL. PL is usually our intensive binyan, although sometimes it can be causative too. PL. So for example, shavar, to break. If I say shiber and I put that dot in the middle, it means to utterly smash to pieces, right? That's in the PL. So shalach is to send, and with the dagesh in there, it's the intensive form, to send out, right? If the king does it, it's to banish. This happens to Avraham Avinu, right? In Egypt, he gets banished. It was one way to interpret it. Sent out, right? And so it also can mean to divorce a woman, right? To send her out, right? And give her the document or whatever in Tanachit. So by shalachu, then they sent out. It's kind of strange language used. And actually, this is also the same word that's used for Avraham Avinu. He sends out his hand with a machelet in his hand, right? To butcher his son. Ketonet hapasim. I'm not going to bother changing colors, folks, in the interest of time. Right? The long, the special tunic, we'll just say. Vayaviu, and they brought it el avihem, unto their av, their father. Vayumru, then they said, Zot matzanu, this thing we found, this matzanu, we found it. Hakelna, haketonet, binechahi. Haker, this is hard to recognize. It's na, it's noon. It's a pei noon verb. Noon. Right? So that's why there's a dot in the kaf, right? The noon has assimilated. It would have been hankel in ancient Hebrew, but in the biblical Hebrew, it's hakel, right? There's two kafs there. So, and this is a hey interrogative. It's a question mark. So, do you kelna? Do you recognize now haketonet, the tunic? Binchahi, it is of your son. Imlo, or not. Okay, so it sounds a little bit caveman-y, but I think you understand the gist of what they're saying there. Verse Lamed Gimel. Vayakira. Okay, maybe we'll sing it. Vayakira. It's kind of hard to sing and do the hey. Vayakira. Vayomer ketonet benihi chaya ra'a achalat hu. Terrible. So noon again here. And he recognized, her. It's her because ketonet is feminine, right? Ends in a tav. It's a feminine word. He recognized her, meaning it. And he said, the ketonet of beni. It's the tunic of my son. Chaya is an animal. That's why Eve's name is Chawa, right? Because her name means life, and she's the mother of all the living. And Chaya, it's like a living thing, right? It's an animal. I guess not to say that plants aren't living things, but this is how the etymology comes out in Hebrew. So Chaya, what kind of Chaya? Ra'ah, an evil one. Literally is what it means. But this is idiomatic. An evil animal means a wild animal, specifically a dangerous animal, like a lion or a bear, a dove, or an ari, something like this. Achalatahu. So, so achala, it would have been hey here, this tav. So I ran out of space, so I'll draw it over here. It would have been a hey. Achala, she ate, meaning the animal ate, okay? But because we put the pronominal suffix on the end, when you put a suffix on the end, if there's a hey at the end of the word, the hey becomes a tav, right? So you put the suffix here, and when we put the suffix, the achala, she ate, becomes a tav here, right? That's why we have the tav. Achalatahu, it's just easier to say. Right? What are you going to say? Achalahu, right? It doesn't work. So she ate him. It's horrible, that word. Imagine what that's pronouncing that one word meant. Kuskuni interprets this that a savage beast devoured him. If he had been attacked by robbers, they would not have left the tunic, right? So it's, clearly their deception is left to be very clear. Tarof, this is very sad. Tarof Toraf Yoseph. So remember last time I spent some time talking about the infinitive absolute. When you have a verb here, and you want to say definitely it's happened, surely it's happened, you repeat it and you write it first in the first spot usually, okay? And this shows that it definitely happened, right? Like the Torah says, Shomor tishmor et yom hashiv'i. You shall indeed keep the seventh day, right? Definitely. Not until I send the Messiah, then all bets are off, because Sunday's the Lord's day, or something like this, right? So it makes it definite, right? It's understood that it's a way of emphasizing the verb. So taraf means to tear. And many of you probably heard this word before. We say something is kosher, or it's treif. Treif. Treif is a Yiddish word that means not kosher, right? You can't eat it. It's like a pig or shrimp sauce or something like this, right? And so treif, it comes from this word, taraf, torn. Because if you find an animal that's been torn by another animal and that's how it died, it's not kosher, right? So you can kind of see how it came into Yiddish language, this other Jewish language. So indeed, Yosef has been torn. Indeed, the idea is torn by a wild animal. Verse Lamed Dalet. Vaikra'a Yaakov Simlotahiv Vayasim Sak Bemotnaiv. Then Yaakov rent, he tore Simlotahiv. So simla is a garment. Simlot is the plural form for the feminine. And then we put the pronominal suffix at the end. His garments. He tore his garments. Vayasim Sak. This is from the verb sim. Sim, yod, mem, to set or to place, right? So yasim, he will place, vayasim, and he placed sak, which this is probably where we get the word sack from in English, from the Hebrew. Sak means sackcloth, right? He put sackcloth, the motnaiv, on his loins. V'tabel al beno yamim rabihim. Okay. Aval, spelled with an aleph, it means to mourn, but it has a very nuanced meaning in Hebrew. To mourn as a parent mourns for a lost child. Like just a terrible sadness that fortunately most do not know. And yit makes it hitpa'el. When you have a verb prefixed by nit, or hit, or yit, that's the sign that it's the hitpa'el binyan, which is usually reflexive. And if you remember, let me check my time, make sure I have time to tell you this. Oh yeah, I have time. If you remember, when I shared with you the chart, you draw a menorah. And by the way, tomorrow night's Chanukah. Don't forget to celebrate Chanukah. Ha exciting. I love Chanukah. Right, here's Work is allowed, but it's technically a minor holiday, but it's really nice. Hanukkah is a nice holiday. It should not be skipped. So here we have menorah, although in Hanukkah we have more branches, but here's the 7-branch menorah. So just a quick review on our grammar here. The left side is, I'll just do Q for kal, okay? That's the basic meaning. Kal meaning light, like not heavy. Kal, right? The basic meaning of the verb, the way you find it in the dictionary, okay? And then on the opposite side, we find nifal. You prefix with a nun, usually, and that means it's the passive form of kal, right? So it's not active. So shavar is to break, nishbar is to be broken, okay? Then, after that, we have the intensive form. The intensive form, I'll use red because it's intensive. PL, which I talked about just a moment ago, where the second radical, the second root letter is doubled. There's a strong dagesh in there, right? PL means basically the same meaning as call. Again, it doesn't always work this way, but this is, if you come across a word you don't know, but you know it in the call, you can figure it out a lot of times. It's really nice. This is where grammar really helps in Hebrew. You don't have to memorize every single verb. You can memorize one, and now you know 7 verbs, right? 7 words. Often. So the PL of shavar is shibel, and it means to utterly smash to pieces, right? The passive form of that is the pu'al. Pu'al. Hushbar means to be utterly smashed to pieces. You see, it's passive. This side over here is typically passive. This side over here is typically active, okay? So then we have the causative form, where we talked about the yod before the third root letter, right? And this is the hefil. Hefil. Hefil means to cause to be whatever it is. So shavar, hishbir means to cause to be broken. And then over here we have the hofal or hufal, depending on which system you're going with there. They're a little bit different in modern Hebrew, by the way. This means the passive of that, to cause to be broken, to have been caused to be broken. And then in the middle, we have our hitpa'el, which is the one that we're looking at right now. And the hitpa'el means to do it to yourself. Usually it's reflexive, right? So hit shaber means to break oneself. You understand? Kitel is to kill. Hit katel is to murder, right? I mean to commit suicide, like to murder oneself. You see? Okay, I hope you all are still here. I'm not seeing much writing. That's fine if you're just paying attention. Okay? And we will be done in time. Don't worry. Okay, so hitpa'el, that's what we had here. Vayit abel, right? So it's almost like he's making himself mourn. He's not allowing the mourning period to go on. He caused himself. He's mourning. He's parental mourning al bano, about his son. All oftentimes means concerning, right? Not just on top of his son. Yamim rabim, for many days. And oftentimes this expression days in plural, it actually means years. Right? And as we see, it's 20 years he mourns his son. Verse Lamed Hey. Vayakumu chol banayv v'chol benotayv l'nachamo vayama'ein lehitnachem vayomer ki ered el beni avel she'ola. So kum is to arise or to stand up. Oh my gosh, I have this clumsy cat. You can't go there. Down you go. Kum is to arise, right? It's a hollow verb. Kuf vav mem, kum, like kuma tabita, right? You probably know this. So yakumu means they will arise, but we have our vav conversive. So they arose. The subject chol banayv, all his children. Sons in this case, sorry. If you have banim, sons or children, but then in context it's next to benot, which means daughters, then you know to translate it sons. So all his sons, the chol benotav, and all his daughters, that includes his daughter and his granddaughter, his daughter Dina and his granddaughter Seirah, lenachamo, to comfort, him. V'yama'ein, so ma'an is to refuse, right? Oftentimes, like when Yeshua says, how I would have gathered you in, like a bird does its goslings, its chicklings, O Jerusalem, but you refused, it's this word. Yima'ein, but Vav makes it past, but he refused. Lahitnachem, look at the sea, we have another hitpa'el, look at that. He refused to comfort himself, right? Or allow himself to be comforted, right? That reflects a meaning. Vayomer, and he said, Ki ered. So this ki, this is hard to translate if you're not familiar with the emphatic ki. And that's what this is. This is a ki emphaticum. It doesn't really make sense to translate it that or because. It's more like an exclamation point in the sentence there. Ered, it's from yarad. Yarad, we had before, it means to go down. To descend, to go down. And it's a pei yod verb, so that yod is going to disappear. And you can kind of see, we would have expected a chirik under here. But instead, the yod came down and he lengthened the short dal chirik to be long dal seri. Ered, I will go down. This is an imperfect. I will go down, el, unto beni, my son, avel, mourning, as a parent mourns for a child, she'ola, towards Sheol, towards the grave. Vayevik ulto, and he cried about him, Aviv, his father. So that's the subject. Verse Lamed Vav, 36. V'hamidanim machru oto el Mitzrayim. Now the Midianites, they sold him unto Mitzrayim, Egypt. Zachentis dias. The Potiphar, to Potiphar. This is actually a nice Egyptian name. In Egyptian, the name is Potiphera, right? So it's this. We're going to be getting into this stuff. I think a lot of you know that I'm an amateur Egyptologist. I like the language, ancient Egyptian language. It's very fun, and it's amazing when you start getting into this part where we're in Egypt. The Bible is just absolutely true and has a lot of Egyptian words, and it understands how things were in Egypt because, well, here it is. We were in Egypt. Potiphar, Saris Paro, Sar HaTabachim. And that is the end of the Aliya today. Let's just translate those last those last four words. Saris. The word is actually Saris with the comets, right? But this is a construct chain. And so what happens, this is read like one word. So this would have been a comets originally, the little thing that looks like a T, but it's before the tone syllable. Here's the tone syllable. So when you have what's called a pretonic comets, and you have a construct chain, in ancient times that was read fast like one word. Suisparo, like as if it was one word, even though we don't do that anymore. And so what happened was that vowel was shortened to the vocal schwa we see here. So if you're wondering why the pointing changes happen, that's what happens. So the saris of paro, because of course Pharaoh is definite, so the whole thing is definite, okay? So what is saris? Saris can mean a lot of things. It can mean, some say it means bodyguard. In Akkadian, we have this phrase, shareshi, the one at the head, right? So somebody important, right? It's a high official according to Halot, or a eunuch. That's very interesting about the eunuch thing. That might be something to think about maybe why his wife is trying to get Yosef. I don't know, maybe he was a eunuch, maybe he wasn't. Maybe there's some conflation of these terms meaning either one of the things, right? They could have different etymologies and they just happen to be the same word. Sar is prince or captain, right? So we have another construct chain. Sar hatabachim. Okay. So tabach can mean butcher or cook, or it can mean bodyguard or executioner. So he's the chief of the executioners. I think it's probably the chief of the bodyguards, but we don't know. It could be something else. It'd be interesting if it's of the cooks, and that would kind of make sense how he might have later heard about what the cupbearer and the baker, the things that happened with them, right, etc. Like I like how Hashem can do many things. Okay, so that's the end of our Aliya Yomi for the third Aliya for this week. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead. Here I am. Okay, I see that Yochanan wrote, I find it interesting that the Toldot in this portion is an account of Yosef with an insertion about Yehuda, but almost entirely about Yosef as the Toldot. Yeah, it's in a way, it almost seems like his father, Yaakov Avinu, that he might have expected the line to continue through Yosef, right? Like in a similar way. So we had Avraham, and then we have Yitzchak being the second son, but he's the one that the line goes through, the bracha, right, the blessing. And then after that we have what? Yishmael is the firstborn, but it goes to Yaakov, right? And so you might have already this understanding from Yaakov that maybe it doesn't have to be the firstborn son. Of course, you know what happens to the firstborn son. He ends up losing his spot anyway for the nasty thing he does. But so maybe there's something like that. There's almost an expectation that Yosef HaTzadik would end up being the next in line, right? Yeah, nice. But of course, like I said, I think actually, that's a nice point you make there. It just occurred to me that I think it might be the text signaling to us about this Mashiach ben Yosef idea, right? To make sure that Chazal would pick up on it as they did. Any other comments or questions? Anything, the grammar or something you've been having trouble with? Please type it out if you have something you want to go into. Our teaching was an hour, 5 minutes long, so. Wow, I'm so glad you're all here. That's a nice turnout. Baruch Hashem. So then, oh, okay. Yochanan says Toldot is plural, yet Yosef is singular. Well, that's because it's in the construct chain. It's a construct. It's in the construct, Yochanan. So Toldot. Well, it's funny. You can't recognize Toldot from construct or absolute because it's a feminine plural. But Toldot means the generations of Yosef, right? Or the genealogies or the registrations of Yosef. It can mean any of those things. Tet says, can you give an example again on the verbs hitpa'el, etc., using to break? Sure. Okay. So let's come up here. I'm not going to write them. I'll just say them, but I'll point. You see my pointer over here? So here's our menorah, okay? The left side of the menorah, this is active verbs. Usually. It's not always this way, but, 86% of the time. The right side of the menorah are passive, right? So in an active verb, the subject is the one doing the thing, right? So shavarti, I broke, and whatever I broke, et hashulchan, the table, right? I broke the table. I'm the one doing it. It's active, okay? So that's the kal. When you first learn a new root, a new shoresh, you usually learn the kal. Because we have kal, like you've probably heard the expression kal vachomer, right? Light and heavy, right? Rav Shul uses this a lot. If this, then how much more so than that, right? That's a rabbinical logical argument. Light and heavy. Kal vachomer, right? So kal meaning light, like lightweight, like light as a feather, okay? So that's the basic binyan that you learn when you look something up in the dictionary, like matzah here, over here, he's in the kal, right? Nothing fancy happening. That's how you, and this is the binyan you guys learned all of the vowel signs and stuff for when we're going through weekly on the grammar stuff, right? Okay, so if you jump over here, the kal passive is nifal. It doesn't always have to be passive in meaning, but generally this is a good thing to remember, okay? Sometimes it's actually to do to oneself, but so nifal, so shavar means he broke, but nishbar means he was broken. You see? It's happening to the subject. If I say nishbar Yosef, it means Yosef was broken because his brothers had sold him into slavery, etc., etc., right? You see how you can build it? Okay. So this guy is the passive of this one. It's a mirror image, okay? Now we move into the second position. PL, the PL. PL is a stronger form. So if I take sheen, I'm not going to do the dot, okay, guys? It's hard drawing on the laptop touch thing. The screen is not, well, the touch on the screen, it is touch, but it's cracked. It's broken, it doesn't work. Okay. So shavar is to break, but shiber, like this, I put the strong dagesh in there. Shiber means to utterly smash to pieces, right? To utterly break, right? So shavarti means I broke. Shibarti means I utterly smashed to pieces. It's still active because it's over here. It's on the left side of the menorah, okay? So now, what is the parallel of that? What's the passive? Well, he's the pu'al. So if I say shuba, it still has that, the Grundstamm, it's called, a lot of scholars call it that, they go with the German nomenclature. Sometimes in some grammars you'll see a big D, right? It means that the second stem is doubled, right? Second letter is doubled. So shuba is the same as PL, right? It's utterly to smash to pieces, but it's passive because it's on this side. So it's to be done to the subject. So lo alai, not upon me, shubati, I was utterly broken to pieces, right? You see? Or I could say the table. I could say shuba hashulchan. The table was utterly broken to pieces. It's passive, right? Why? Lama? Shibati. I utterly broke it to pieces, right? Okay. And then we have the hefil, which is the causative, right? And hefil is marked, you'll have a hey, but not in the imperfect. So you have a hey here. So that's like a prefix. And then you have your verb. Sorry, it's so sloppy. It's my finger on the thing. And then you have a yod before the third root letter, okay? Hish bil. And you do have a dagesh here, but it's a weak dagesh. this dagesh, it's only because he's a begad kefat letter. Okay, if I used a different thing, there wouldn't be a dagesh in there. And that's because hish, the syllable breaks there, so it's a closed syllable. So begad kefat gets the weak dagesh. Okay, hishbir means this is causative, to cause to break, right? So, so the mother might ask the child, why is the table broken? And then the child could say, my brother, hishbir, he caused it to be broken. You see, he caused me to break it. He made me break it. Hishbir tani, he caused me to break it. Hishbirani, pardon me, hishbirni. Sorry, he made me break it. You see, that's causative. And then hofal is the passive of that. So hushbar. Maybe I'll just stop drawing out now. So it's passive but cause. So it was caused to be broken. You see, it's a little bit. It doesn't always fit nicely. And then the hitpa'el, to do to oneself. So if you have a very young child, or maybe the child likes to tell stories, what happened to the table? Oh, hitshaber, it broke itself. You see, it's passive now. Hitshaber, it broke itself. It happened to itself. Okay. Yochanan says the right side of the verbal menorah is the subject receiving the action. Yes, of the verb. So no object is needed. Exactly. Or can the verb, but you can have an object if you want. It just means that the object is being acted on by the verb instead of being the driver of the verb, right? Usually. Not always. There are some weird verbs that they just occur in nifal and it's not being passive or whatever. It does happen. But this is a great generalization to have to help you break in. And he says, or can the verb be nifal and have an object? Yes, it can, right? So if I want to say my table was broken, I'll just say the table was broken. Nishba hashulchan. The table was broken, right? I specified the subject. If we're already talking about the table, and I know what you're talking about, I can just say nishba. It was broken, right? Because you already know it's built into the verb in that case. Can the sentence have an object following a default? Yeah, yes, okay. Any other comments or questions? Oh, can it have an object? No. Okay, wait, wait. Not if the nifal is a passive verb, right? There are some examples where you can have nifal where it does have et following it, for example. Sorry, it took me a second to realize what you're asking, Yochanan. So you can actually have, yes, you can have a nifal verb followed by an object, but usually you don't need it because the subject is the object, right? It's like the verb's acting on it already. Yeah. Any other questions, comments? If you do have a passive nifal verb with another item following it, usually it will be preceded by bait, and that's the instrument, the thing that's being used. So the table was broken, becharbi, with my sword, right, like that. So someone says, "How'd the table get broken?" Becharbi, with my sword, right? So then that's what it happens. Yeah, Ted, that's fine. You go ahead and review, guys. Again, this is I'm just introducing it. It's okay. We'll have a grammar point one time where we'll hit each of these. Yeah. So I think it's good to be introduced for those who really like to dive in, and you guys are pouring through stuff. Okay, looks like we're about at time. Oh yeah, we went 4 minutes over. I apologize. Okay, everybody have a great week, and hopefully pray for me. Hopefully I can bang out the fourth Aliya tomorrow. You're welcome. You're very welcome. Baruch Hashem. Okay, I'm gonna end the meeting now. Yep, welcome everybody. Make sure to check out Hebrew Literacy. Please follow. Please click subscribe, huh? Okay.